Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to talk about how to find your sensitivity in Apex Legends on mouse and keyboard. Unfortunately, we're not going to cater towards controller players, as I simply just do not know enough about ALC settings or just controller settings in general. That doesn't mean if you are a controller player, you will not get any value from this video. A lot of the same concepts that I will be talking about will still apply to you. It's just going to be slightly different terminology. If there are any controller demons watching this video that would like to collaborate though in the near future talking about ALC settings and just all controller settings in general, I would be more than happy to discuss that. Maybe we can make the video together or just get in a Discord call and I can shout you out when I make the video in the future. So let's go ahead and get into this video. So before I talk about DPI, in-game sensitivity, pros and cons of high versus low sensitivity, I kind of want to talk about being comfortable on the sensitivity that you pick, right? So let's talk about it as if there's two new players to the game, right? One being somebody that has a little bit of mouse and keyboard experience, but comes from a different game, a different kind of FPS like Valorant or CSGO, and then the other being a controller player that has never touched mouse and keyboard before, or a very little amount. So if you're a Valorant kind of person, you might come into this game with super low sensitivity. Naturally in Valorant, you're just going to have lower sensitivity as precision is king. In this game, there's a lot of different aim mechanics that are very important. For example, you have to turn around really quickly. You have to be able to precisely aim from here to here, different targets, and also be able to track fast moving targets relatively easily. Whereas in Valorant, basically everything is going to be in front of you. In Apex, people can come from behind you, next to you, in multiple different directions. So playing on a really low sensitivity might hurt you because you're not going to be able to react to something right behind you as quickly as somebody on a really high sensitivity. Now that's the opposite end of the spectrum, right? People that are newer to the game that might come from controller or just have no mouse and keyboard experience at all are naturally going to play on a really high sensitivity when they first start because they're not used to moving their whole arm, swinging their whole arm around. And that's going to solve the issue with reacting to things quickly, but it's not going to solve the precision issue that it's going to create. On a higher sensitivity, it's going to be hard to flick from target to target and be more precise. Also, on a higher sensitivity, your mouse control errors are going to be a lot more noticeable, whereas on a lower sensitivity, your errors in your mouse control is going to be it's going to look a lot smoother, which doesn't make one or the other better, but it really just comes down to being able to find a balance where you don't sacrifice any aim mechanics when you pick your sensitivity, right? That's where being comfortable comes into play. You want to be able to be comfortable so you can do all of those things, but also being able to be comfortable means that you're also not thinking about your sensitivity and your aim as much when you play. There's already so many factors when you play Apex Legends. For example, there's third parties, there's the ring coming in, there's your teammates' positionings. Are they with you? Are they not? Are they pushed up too much? There's the enemy's positioning. You have to account for 3 other people on the enemy team. What abilities do they have? What characters are they? There's so many different factors that play a part into each individual game that while you're also thinking about aim, chances are you're going to be tunnel visioned on just hitting your shots and not thinking about all the other important details that are just as, if not more important than your aim in Apex. So if you're comfortable, it's going to allow you to develop your aim a lot quicker than if you're not comfortable. If you're really shaky or swipey, or if your sensitivity is too low, chances are you're going to tunnel vision on your aim and just not be aware of all of the other stuff going around you. So if you're not thinking about your aim, in theory, you will get better at all of the other aspects of the game as well. Let's start off with DPI, right? So DPI is super important. If you're coming from other games, you might already have a set DPI, and that is completely fine. You do not need to change your DPI if you don't want to. But for people that don't know what DPI is, what DPI is simply just how quickly your mouse cursor moves across your screen, while your in-game sensitivity is a multiplier of your DPI. So like I said, your DPI is how fast your mouse cursor moves across your screen. So 1600, it's going to move a lot faster with less movement of your wrist, whereas on 400, you almost have to move your whole arm across your screen to be able to get it from one side of the screen to the other. I play on 800. I find it's a really good balance. Most mice default to 800 as well, so I've just been used to it of the years of just editing videos and doing all that other stuff. So 800 might be a good starting point, 1600 might be a good starting point, 3200 I'd say is a little bit too high for a starting point. You can do it, it's very doable, but it's definitely on the very high end of the spectrum. I'd say even 1600 for most people is going to be too high, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to being comfortable with your DPI. Your DPI doesn't necessarily affect your in-game sensitivity. For example, you can play on the same in-game sensitivity on 1600 or 800 DPI. So I play on 1.2 800 DPI. If I wanted to play on the same sensitivity on 1600 DPI, since I'm doubling my DPI, I'd have to cut my in-game sensitivity by half. So 1.2 800 would become 0.6 1600. Same concept for 400. If I were to half it, my DPI, I would have to double my in-game sensitivity. So 1.2 would become 2.4. Hopefully that makes sense. I've provided a sensitivity calculator in the comments or in the description down below. It's super self-explanatory, but if you pick a different DPI that is not 800, when I go over all the in-game sensitivities, I'm going to be referring to it as an 800 DPI. You'll be able to easily calculate it as you watch this video. So super self-explanatory to use. Like I said, how do you pick your DPI? All you're really going to want to do, DPI is present on things like your desktop, when you go on Twitter, when you Facebook, just anything where you see your mouse cursor, that's when DPI is apparent. For example, when you go into Apex, your menu, you see your mouse cursor, right? So that's where your DPI is apparent. When you're aiming and whatnot, your DPI is still technically apparent, but it's multiplied by your in-game sensitivity. So another good time is when you kill somebody and you go into your death box, you see your mouse cursor, and that's when DPI is going to play a part. So how do you find your DPI? Just go into the Apex menu or on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and just start clicking around on a random DPI. I suggest starting at 1600 or 800 or somewhere in between. If you don't have a software for your mouse, then you have a DPI button. If you don't know what your DPI settings are, look up the mouse that you have. For example, this is the Starlight 12. I would look up Starlight 12 DPI settings, and by that I would be able to see what each click, how much that increases or decreases my DPI. So again, pick a DPI. I start at 800. That's just because that's what I play on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click around. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to click from audio to gameplay. And if you find yourself going way past where audio is consistently and then going back and going way past gameplay, then chances are the DPI is going to be a little bit too high. Now, if you find yourself struggling and exerting a lot of energy to go from here to here, then that probably means it's too low. Now, obviously, this is a very extreme example. You're going to want to click around a lot more than what I'm doing to be able to tell if it's a good or bad DPI for you. But hopefully you guys can get the point of that. Just click around a lot, and eventually you will be able to find a comfortable DPI. Do not stress your DPI too much, as it's not as important as you think. You will be able to adapt to it as long as it's relatively comfortable for you. Now it's time to talk about in-game sensitivity. So again, like I said, everything is going to be on the 800 DPI scale. If you need to calculate it, use the sensitivity calculator I've provided in the description. So anywhere between 1.2 and 2.0 800 DPI is going to be a very relatively good sensitivity in terms of all the things we talked about before: turning around, flicking from target to target, and also tracking targets quickly or slowly, just depending on the situation. All of these sensitivities are utilized by a lot of pro players and big content creators, which is why this is the range that I'm using. Most pros go at the lowest at 1.2. Most pros at the highest go to like 2.0, 2.2 kind of range. Whereas anywhere higher than that is kind of talking about what we talked about before, where you're kind of sacrificing a lot of your precision. You can already see how much more jittery I am on this high of a sensitivity compared to something on the lower end of the spectrum, which is going to be a lot more precise, but you can see how long it takes me to turn around. I have to do 2 full swipes basically to be able to just look right behind me. Which also is not something you want. So when finding your comfortable sensitivity, you can use something in this range, but that doesn't mean you're going to be good on it. It doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable on it. So let's start, for the sake of this, let's start on 2.0, right? So I'm going to flick from here to here, do a little 180 test, see if that feels good. I feel like if we're just for the sake of this video, if I were to feel like that felt slow, I'm going to raise it to 2.2. That feels a little bit better, right? So we're going to stick with 2.2, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go from target to target. Now the turning around is the least important part of this test, right? I'd say the flicking is the most important if you're in the range, just because it's going to be the thing that you can kind of get a the best feel out of what it would actually feel like in a real game, opposed to tracking. These targets are super easy to track, unfortunately. So let's say my flicking, it feels too fast. I'm going past my target. We're going to use the same concept we use with the DPI, where since I'm going past it, I'm going to lower it back down to 2. And this still feels a little fast, so I'm going to go down to 1.8 even. And now this feels better, right? So if this feels better, then this is probably a good starting point for you. I suggest maybe doing the G7 scout of action a few times. And what you're going to want to do is just go through this, see what your score is, do this maybe like 5 to 10 times, make sure that this is a good sensitivity. You feel like this is a really good starting point. If you really want to take that farther, go on a lower sensitivity and again do it for another 5 to 10 minutes and see how that feels, and then go back to the original sensitivity, and you'll probably have a better idea of where it feels good for you in that range that you're playing on. So by that, let's just say it feels okay, so I'm going to go in between 1.8 and 1.4. We'll go to 1.6, and now this feels really good, right? It's a good balance of everything I need in aim, and I'm going to hop into games with this sensitivity. Now, I know I keep saying comfortable sensitivity is important and whatnot, but I really want to stress the fact that your comfortable sensitivity might not be your perfect sensitivity. There's no such thing as a perfect sensitivity, by the way. I don't want to use the word perfect. I want to stay away from that, so we won't use that word again. But your comfortable sensitivity might not be the sensitivity that's best for you in the future. I just want you guys to understand that you should not be changing your sensitivity every day. If you change your sensitivity every single day, it's going to kind of create a placebo effect, right? So say you're playing on 1.8 sensitivity right today, and it feels really good, you're hitting all your shots, and you get on tomorrow and you're like, yeah, this is the sense, and you're missing every single shot. So you're like, okay, maybe it should be lower. So you lower it, you're hitting all your shots. The next day, same thing. You know, that's what happens when you change your sensitivity every single day. You're going to create this false security of if it's a good sensitivity or not, right? So you're gonna want to stay on this sensitivity for, I'd say, 5 days to 2 weeks, anywhere between. I'd say 2 weeks on the safer side. You'll definitely know like if it's too high or too low, but if you go 5 days, it might not be enough time. So minimum, I'd say stay on the sensitivity that you pick for 5 days, see if you're improving on it, and if you're drastically not improving on it, if you see small improvements, then stay on it for another week or two. But if you're not seeing any improvements at all, if you don't feel any more stable, any more smooth, then maybe change it after 5 days. But like I said, minimum 5 days, maximum maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks, you might be like, yeah, this is the sensitivity. You might see a lot of progress, and you might want to keep developing your skill or your mouse control on that sensitivity. Okay, so now I kind of want to go over the pros and the cons of high versus low sensitivity. I know we've briefly talked about this at the beginning of the video. For example, high sensitivity is going to show off a lot more of your lack of mouse control, while low sensitivity is going to create this false mask of smoothness and good mouse control. It doesn't actually mean you're good at aiming. It just helps you develop, or not develop necessarily, it helps you mask the bad aim habits that you have, is what I'm trying to say. Low sensitivity is also potentially going to create more fatigue over long gaming hours, since you're moving your arm a lot more. You might not even notice that you're playing bad as you get farther and farther into the session. You're playing worse and worse just because you're getting naturally more tired from moving more of your body, right? So you can, to increase this, if you prefer a lower sensitivity, you can do things like arm workouts, shoulder workouts, to kind of create more stamina with your arm, right? That's not something I feel comfortable talking about, as I don't know a lot of information about that, but that's something, some research you can do on your own if you so choose to do. Where is on high sensitivity, right? So high sensitivity, since you're moving your arm less, it's going to exert less energy, giving you the chance to play longer hours at a higher level, hopefully. So that doesn't mean that a higher sensitivity or lower sensitivity is going to be better or worse, right? Higher sensitivity is definitely easier to adjust to fast moving targets, but this can also be a con, as it can cause a lot of swiping, right? And it's the same concept for lower sensitivity, where you could be swiping a lot just because you simply cannot keep up with your target. High sensitivity is definitely more of like a high risk, high reward kind of thing. If you're playing really well, the reward is really, really good and it's really fun and you have a good time. Whereas on low sensitivity, it's going to probably be safer for you and you're going to perform more consistently on a day-to-day basis. So it will be easier to get back into the game is what I'm trying to say. So overall, I think there's just more pros to lower sensitivity. As if you're new to the game, I think it'd be more beneficial for you to start on a lower sensitivity on like that closer to 1.2 to 1.5 800 DPI range than 2.0 and up kind of range, as it will just mask a lot of your errors and it will just help you become more comfortable at not only aiming but all the other aspects of the game as well. So that's gonna go ahead and wrap it up for today. Let me know if you guys want anything specific out of me for video purposes. Yeah, let's go ahead and get out of here. Peace, guys. If we can hit 10 likes on this would be awesome. All right, bye.